The crystal chandeliers above the Q4 dinner glowed like polished ice, while laughter rolled across the ballroom in careful corporate waves. Leela's insult drew smiles from the table until Rebecca quietly slid her phone face down beside her teacup, and somewhere 3 floors below, a trustee file began unlocking doors no one realized she still controlled. Rebecca Hart never raised her voice in rooms designed to intimidate people. She had learned long ago that the loudest person at the table was usually the one bleeding confidence beneath the silk and cufflinks. So when Leela Vance leaned back beneath the amber glow of the hotel ballroom and pointed at Rebecca's wedding ring with that sharp little smile, sharpened by expensive wine and an audience, Rebecca only lowered her eyes to her teacup. "That ring is the only expensive thing you own?" The words floated through the Q4 dinner like perfume spilled over flame. Not loud, not dramatic, worse, deliberate. Several executives laughed too quickly, eager in the desperate way corporate people often became around power. The sound echoed beneath the chandeliers while waiters moved silently between tables, carrying plates no one would remember tomorrow. Outside the towering windows, rain painted silver rivers across Manhattan glass, turning the skyline blurry and unreal. Rebecca smiled faintly. Not wounded, not defensive, just tired. Leela mistook that expression immediately. Most people did. The Vance Financial dinner had always felt less like a celebration and more like theater for wealthy predators pretending to applaud one another. Gold-trimmed menus, crystal water glasses, a string quartet in the corner performing songs no one actually listened to. Every conversation carried the scent of strategy hidden beneath compliments. And tonight, Leela was performing for investors. Rebecca reached for her tea with calm fingers while several vice presidents exchanged glances across the table. Someone coughed awkwardly. Another executive pretended sudden fascination with quarterly projections glowing on the screen near the stage. Leela enjoyed the silence too much. "You really should let Martin buy you something newer," she added smoothly, inspecting her manicured nails. Especially now. Especially now. There it was, the whisper that had been moving through the company hallways for weeks like cold air under a locked door. Martin Hart, the company's quiet CFO and Rebecca's husband, had allegedly lost influence after restructuring talks with the bank. Rumors multiplied inside corporate offices faster than mold in darkness. One analyst claimed Martin was about to resign. Another swore the board planned to cut him out completely. Someone in compliance hinted the company's debt structure was fragile, and fragile things attracted vultures. Leela had circled for months. Rebecca finally lifted her gaze. "You seem very informed." "I pay attention," Leela replied. "No," Rebecca thought calmly. "You listen at doors." The orchestra shifted songs. A waiter refreshed sparkling water no one touched. Across the ballroom, the CEO laughed too loudly at something one of the investors said, though his shoulders looked tight beneath his tailored tuxedo. Pressure was everywhere tonight. Pressure always made people careless. Rebecca's phone vibrated once against the white tablecloth. A single notification. Legal vault access verified. Her thumb rested lightly against the edge of the screen without unlocking it again. Tiny motion. Invisible to everyone else, but something subtle changed behind her eyes, and Martin noticed. From 3 seats away, he paused mid-conversation with bank counsel, not because he had seen the message itself, but because after 14 years of marriage, he recognized the dangerous stillness that came over Rebecca whenever she had already made a decision. He set down his wine glass slowly. Leela kept smiling, unaware. "So," Leela continued, leaning toward the table with predatory elegance, "what exactly do you even do these days, Rebecca? I never see your name on the reports." Another small laugh spread around the table. Rebecca folded her napkin carefully beside her plate. Years ago, those comments would have hurt, back when she still believed invisible work carried invisible respect, back when she thought loyalty naturally protected people. Then she had spent 6 years organizing legal structures nobody appreciated until emergencies arrived. Trust frameworks, asset shields, succession contingencies, things executives ignored because they were boring, until millions vanished overnight. The irony was almost beautiful. "You're right," Rebecca said softly. "Most people don't see my work." Leela lifted a brow triumphantly, sensing surrender. That was the moment Rebecca almost felt sorry for her. Almost, because arrogance in corporate environments behaved exactly like cracked ice over deep water. The surface looked glamorous right before it collapsed. Across the ballroom, one of the junior analysts suddenly hurried toward the exit while checking his phone repeatedly. His expression had drained of color. Two others noticed him leave and exchanged confused looks. Then another phone vibrated, and another. The rhythm spread subtly across the room like distant thunder. Leela frowned for the first time. Martin didn't move at all now. Rebecca calmly took another sip of tea. "What's happening?" someone muttered near the center table. No one answered immediately. Near the ballroom entrance, the company's legal director appeared unexpectedly, speaking in a tense whisper to bank counsel. The older attorney stiffened so abruptly his chair scraped marble. A hush began creeping through the dinner. Not silence, fear. Leela glanced around with irritation. Honestly, can people survive one evening without drama? Rebecca almost smiled again. Almost. Her phone lit once more. "Trustee authorization file accepted." The words glowed softly against black glass. 3 years earlier, when Vance Financial expanded too aggressively into private acquisitions, the board had demanded emergency protection structures to reassure lenders. Most executives treated the documentation like annoying insurance paperwork. They signed where lawyers pointed and forgot about it instantly, except Rebecca had built the structure herself. Every clause, every trigger, every contingency, including one very specific emergency authority attached to the primary trustee account, an authority everyone assumed had quietly transferred after internal restructuring. It hadn't. Leela shifted in her chair now, sensing movement beneath the polished floor of the evening. The confidence around her mouth flickered. "Martin," she said lightly, "why does legal look like someone died?" Martin held her gaze for 2 long seconds. Then he answered with brutal calm. "Because the bank just froze the Crescent credit line." The room changed. No explosion, no dramatic shouting, just the terrifying vacuum that appears when powerful people realize money has stopped moving. Several executives grabbed phones simultaneously. One investor stood so fast his chair tipped backward. Across the ballroom, voices lowered into urgent whispers sharp enough to cut glass. Leela stared. "The what?" "The 52 million revolving line," Martin clarified quietly. Her expression lost color. "That's impossible." Rebecca set down her teacup with delicate precision. No anger, no triumph, only inevitability. Outside, rain hammered harder against the windows, washing the city in silver streaks, while somewhere below the ballroom floor, lawyers, compliance officers, and banking counsel were already tearing through emergency procedures. And for the first time that evening, Leela finally looked at Rebecca not like decoration, but like a locked door she had forgotten to check. What Leela still didn't understand was far more dangerous. The freeze had not happened because Rebecca attacked the company. It happened because Rebecca protected the trust. And by morning, everyone at Vance Financial would learn exactly who still controlled it. If they had paid closer attention earlier, the signs had been there all along. Rain followed Manhattan all night like a stubborn rumor. By midnight, the glass towers around Vance Financial reflected nothing except streaks of silver and scattered office lights where frightened employees still sat refreshing inboxes that refused to deliver reassurance. The Q4 dinner had ended early, though no one officially announced it. Conversations simply dissolved. Investors disappeared into elevators. Executives abandoned untouched desserts. Even the violinists packed their instruments in uncomfortable silence. Only the scent of expensive candles remained floating through the ballroom like evidence after a fire. Rebecca stepped into the hotel corridor alone, fastening the buttons of her charcoal coat while distant elevator chimes echoed through marble halls. Her heels clicked softly against polished stone, calm, unhurried. Behind her, panic was multiplying floor by floor. Ahead of her, winter air waited beyond revolving glass doors. Rebecca? Martin's voice stopped her near the elevators. She turned slowly. He looked exhausted already. Not weak, never weak, but worn in the precise way men looked after realizing the storm they feared had arrived earlier than expected. His tie hung slightly loose now, and tiny lines of strain sharpened around his eyes beneath the gold hallway lights. For a moment, neither spoke. Marriages survived many things. Silence was often the hardest. "You triggered the trustee review?" he said quietly. Not an accusation, recognition. Rebecca studied him carefully. "I activated the emergency protection clause." Martin exhaled once through his nose. "The board's going to lose their minds. They should have read the agreement before signing it." A faint shadow of irony crossed his face despite the tension. That was the dangerous thing about Rebecca. Her calm never arrived empty. It arrived carrying receipts. The elevator doors opened behind them with a soft metallic sigh, spilling nervous executives into the hallway. Two compliance officers rushed past, whispering about liquidity exposure. Another man was already on speakerphone arguing with legal counsel. No one noticed Rebecca. That invisibility had protected her for years, until tonight. Martin lowered his voice further. "Leela thinks this is retaliation?" Rebecca gave the smallest shake of her head. "Retaliation is emotional. This is procedural." Somewhere down the hallway, a junior associate nearly collided with a catering cart while staring at his phone. The entire building felt tilted now, as if the foundations beneath corporate certainty had shifted half an inch sideways. And half an inch was enough to crack everything? Martin glanced toward the ballroom doors before speaking again. "Bank counsel said the freeze came directly from trustee authority validation." "It did. They verified your signature." "I know." The pause stretched longer this time. Outside the hotel windows, lightning flickered faintly beyond skyscrapers, illuminating clouds like bruises spreading across the sky. Martin stepped closer. "Rebecca, why didn't you tell me you still held primary authorization?" There it was. Not fear, not anger. The real question. Rebecca looked at him for several seconds before answering. "Because 3 months ago, someone inside the executive office tried to remove me from the trust structure entirely." His expression hardened instantly. "What?" "They submitted amended documentation through internal review." Her tone remained smooth, almost conversational. "Sloppy timing, wrong sequence numbers. I noticed before legal processed it." Martin stared at her. For the first time all evening, genuine shock crossed his face. "Who?" Rebecca adjusted one sleeve calmly. "That's the interesting part." The elevator chimed again behind them. Another group emerged carrying laptops and frightened expressions. One woman from Treasury looked close to tears. Someone else muttered the words "margin exposure" like a prayer collapsing in real time. The corporate machine was trembling now, and trembling systems exposed fingerprints. Martin's jaw tightened. "You think Leela was involved?" "I think Leela talks too much for someone who doesn't understand where the walls are." That answer landed heavily between them, because both of them knew Leela's ambition had been accelerating for months. New investor dinners, private meetings with board members, carefully planted rumors about restructuring leadership. She floated through office corridors wearing confidence like sharp perfume. But confidence without access was theater. Rebecca finally pressed the elevator button. "You should go home," Martin said quietly. She looked at him. "No," she replied. "You should." The elevator doors slid open. Inside stood Ethan Cole from corporate legal holding a tablet against his chest like a shield. The moment he saw Rebecca, he straightened instantly. Not socially, instinctively. People only reacted that way around invisible authority once they realized it existed. "Mrs. Hart?" Ethan said carefully. Bank counsel requested confirmation on archival trustee files. Rebecca stepped into the elevator. Already uploaded? Ethan blinked once. All of them? Yes. A flicker of alarm crossed his face, because all of them meant decades of protected structures, dormant clauses, beneficiary controls, and contingency chains most executives had never bothered reading. The elevator doors closed behind them. Martin remained standing in the hallway watching Rebecca descend through mirrored steel and gold light, and for the first time in years, he looked less like a CFO and more like a man realizing his wife had quietly been holding the building together from beneath the floorboards. The ride down felt colder. Ethan shifted nervously beside her while the elevator numbers blinked lower one by one. Legal is trying to stabilize investor communications, he said. The board's demanding an emergency call at 7. Rebecca nodded once. The freeze won't destroy the company, Ethan added quickly, almost hopefully. No, Rebecca agreed, but it will expose it. Silence swallowed the elevator again. On the lobby floor, security personnel suddenly moved with unusual urgency near reception desks. Assistants hurried through marble corridors carrying folders. 2 journalists already lingered outside beyond the revolving doors despite the rain. News traveled faster than elevators in Manhattan. Rebecca crossed the lobby toward the exit while Ethan struggled to keep pace. "Mrs. Hart," he said quietly, "there's something else." She stopped near the doors. His voice lowered. "The trustee archive shows an access request from 48 hours ago." Rebecca's eyes narrowed slightly. "Whose credentials?" Ethan hesitated. "That's the problem. The request came from inside executive administration, but the identity tag was masked." For the first time all evening, stillness sharpened around Rebecca like drawn wire. Not panic, calculation. The storm outside rattled against glass walls, while taxis blurred gold and red through the rain-soaked avenue. Somewhere above them, inside conference rooms glowing long past midnight, executives were probably searching for someone to blame already. But blame was smoke. Documentation was concrete. Rebecca looked toward the wet Manhattan streets beyond the doors. Reflections of city lights shimmered across the pavement like fractured pieces of another world. Then her phone vibrated again. One message. From Bank Counsel, primary trust status confirmed, secondary review initiated. Rebecca read it once, only once, because she understood immediately what secondary review meant. Someone else had tried to position themselves close enough to the trust structure to gain emergency leverage if the company destabilized. Someone inside the building, someone careful. And suddenly, Leela's cruelty at dinner felt less personal and more like confidence borrowed from a plan she believed was already succeeding. Ethan noticed the shift in Rebecca's expression. "What is it?" Rebecca slipped the phone back into her coat pocket. "The wrong person became impatient?" Then she stepped into the rain. Behind her, 43 floors above the avenue, lights still burned inside Vance Financial headquarters like candles inside a sinking ship. And somewhere in that building, someone had just realized Rebecca Hart was no longer invisible. By sunrise, they would understand something even worse. The trust had never slipped out of her hands at all. Some people at Vance Financial were about to become very afraid of documents they once ignored. Some people protect power loudly, others do it with one signature and perfect timing. Which kind are you? The rain finally stopped just before dawn, but Manhattan still looked drenched in tension. Gray morning light crept across the financial district, like exhaustion settling over a battlefield no one officially admitted had happened. Office towers flickered awake one floor at a time, while delivery trucks hissed through wet streets below. Somewhere a siren wailed briefly, then vanished into the city's endless mechanical heartbeat. Inside Vance Financial headquarters, nobody touched the pastries laid out for the emergency board meeting. Coffee disappeared instead, gallons of it. Rebecca arrived at 6:42 a.m., wearing the same charcoal coat from the night before, though now it carried faint silver rain marks along the sleeves. Security guards at the lobby desk straightened the moment they saw her. One nearly dropped his visitor tablet. Interesting, she thought. Respect always arrived late in corporate environments, usually 5 minutes after fear. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt strangely silent, despite the building vibrating with crisis energy. Phones rang nonstop behind closed office doors. Assistants hurried through corridors carrying printed reports no one had time to read completely. Somewhere nearby, a copier jammed repeatedly while someone cursed under their breath. Pressure had a smell: burnt coffee, printer ink, panic hidden beneath expensive cologne. When the elevator opened, Rebecca stepped directly into controlled chaos. Two Treasury analysts stood outside the conference room arguing quietly over liquidity schedules. Ethan from legal moved briskly past carrying 3 red folders marked "Confidential." At the far end of the hallway, Leela stood near the glass wall, speaking sharply into her phone. She looked immaculate. That alone revealed how worried she truly was. People who weren't afraid forgot details during emergencies. Leela had not forgotten a single detail. Her ivory blazer sat perfectly tailored. Her lipstick remained untouched. Even her posture looked rehearsed. But beneath the polish, tension flickered visibly now. The moment she noticed Rebecca approaching, the conversation on her phone stopped mid-sentence. Leela lowered the device slowly. For one suspended second, the hallway noise seemed to blur around them. Then Leela smiled. Too quickly. "Well," she said lightly, "looks like you caused yourself a very dramatic morning." Rebecca removed her gloves finger by finger. "The bank caused the freeze." "Please." Leela crossed her arms. "You activated the trustee file." Several nearby employees instantly pretended not to listen, which meant they listened harder. Rebecca noticed everything: the analyst frozen beside the printer, Ethan slowing his pace without turning around, the assistant gripping coffee cups too tightly. Corporate buildings loved gossip almost as much as money. "I protected the trust structure," Rebecca replied calmly. Leela stepped closer. "You embarrassed the board?" "No," Rebecca said softly. "The board embarrassed itself?" That landed harder than shouting would have. Leela's expression sharpened. "Do you realize investors are panicking?" Rebecca looked toward the conference room doors, where muffled arguing already leaked through polished wood. "I realize investors are finally asking questions they should have asked 6 months ago." A flicker crossed Leela's face then. Small, dangerous. Rebecca saw it immediately: not outrage, calculation. And suddenly she understood something important. Leela wasn't merely upset about the credit freeze. She was afraid of what the review process might uncover. Before Rebecca could answer again, the conference room doors burst open. "Mrs. Hart," Ethan called urgently, "the board needs you inside." Not requests anymore, needs. Another thing feared changed quickly. Rebecca walked past Leela without hurry, though she could feel Leela watching her the entire way, like someone staring at a match near gasoline. Inside, the executive conference room looked less like leadership and more like survivors trapped inside an expensive aquarium. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the pale skyline beyond, while digital reports glowed across screens around the table. No one looked rested. The CEO, Arthur Vance, stood near the center monitor, rubbing his temples. Two outside directors whispered aggressively near the windows. Bank counsel sat perfectly still beside stacks of legal documentation, and Martin looked like he had aged 5 years overnight. The room quieted when Rebecca entered. Arthur turned immediately. "Rebecca, sit down." She remained standing instead. Interesting silence followed. Power often revealed itself through who remained standing. Arthur exhaled slowly. "Bank counsel confirmed the freeze is temporary pending trustee verification?" "Yes." "Then reverse it." The bluntness almost made Rebecca smile. Almost. She placed her gloves neatly on the table before answering. "I can't." The room erupted instantly. "What do you mean you can't? You initiated it. This is destroying confidence." One director slammed a hand against the table hard enough to rattle water glasses. Rebecca waited. Not defensive, not intimidated, simply patient. Eventually, noise collapsed beneath its own weight. Then she spoke. The trustee file triggered a mandatory secondary review because unauthorized amendment requests were detected inside executive administration. Dead silence. Outside, clouds drifted slowly across the skyline, while somewhere deep below the building, elevators hummed like distant machinery beneath ocean water. Arthur stared at her carefully. Unauthorized by whom? That's what legal is determining. Bank counsel finally spoke for the first time that morning. The review cannot legally be stopped until the access chain is verified. A director swore quietly beneath his breath. Another executive suddenly avoided eye contact entirely. Rebecca noticed that too. People always revealed themselves during procedural conversations. Honest people became frustrated, nervous people became quiet, and one person in the room had become very quiet. Leela. She stood near the windows now, with one hand resting against the chair behind her. Still composed, still elegant, but silent. Rebecca looked directly at her. Something wrong? Leela's gaze snapped toward her instantly. Excuse me? You seem unusually cautious this morning. The room tightened. Even Arthur sensed it. Leela gave a brittle laugh. Unlike you, some of us are trying to save this company. Rebecca tilted her head slightly. By accessing masked authorization channels? A pulse visibly jumped near Leela's jaw. Tiny movement. Huge mistake. Because now everyone saw it. Arthur straightened slowly. Leela? That's ridiculous, she interrupted sharply. You can't seriously imply— I'm not implying anything, Rebecca said. I'm waiting for legal confirmation. Another silence crashed into the room. Heavy this time, the kind that changed careers. Martin suddenly looked toward Ethan, who had just entered carrying another red folder. Ethan hesitated only briefly before handing the documents directly to bank counsel instead of Arthur. That detail did not go unnoticed. Bank counsel opened the file calmly, read 2 pages, then removed his glasses. Well, he said quietly, that complicates things? Nobody moved. Nobody breathed properly. Rebecca watched Leela carefully now. And for the first time since the Q4 dinner, Leela no longer looked arrogant. She looked cornered, not publicly destroyed, not exposed, worse, uncertain, because uncertainty inside corporate walls spread faster than scandal. Once confidence cracked, every past conversation suddenly sounded suspicious in hindsight. Arthur stepped forward slowly. Counsel, what exactly are we looking at? The attorney closed the folder. A failed credential replication attempt tied to executive-level routing? The room froze. Leela's hand tightened visibly against the chair. Rebecca said nothing. She didn't need to, because sometimes the most devastating thing a person could do was remain calm while the truth walked into the room by itself. And somewhere behind Leela's controlled expression, panic finally began leaking through the cracks. The problem was, Rebecca still wasn't entirely sure Leela had acted alone. By noon, the executive floor no longer sounded like a corporation. It sounded like weather. Phones rang in uneven bursts. Legal teams crossed corridors carrying stacks of binders thick enough to stop bullets. Every conference room glowed with emergency meetings behind frosted glass, while assistants moved with the tense speed of people afraid to become visible at the wrong moment. The building had entered survival mode, and survival mode made hierarchy behave strangely. People who once ignored Rebecca now stepped aside automatically when she passed. Analysts lowered their voices near her office. Even senior directors watched her with careful expressions, as if trying to calculate how much authority she actually possessed, and whether they had accidentally insulted her sometime in the past. Rebecca noticed all of it. None of it interested her. Her office overlooked the East River, where pale winter sunlight shimmered weakly against steel-gray water. Normally, she liked the quiet here, the order, shelves lined with neatly indexed trust archives, soft amber lighting, the faint scent of cedar from old legal binders. Today, the room felt different, sharper somehow, like the air before glass breaks. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Come in? Martin entered carrying 2 coffees. Not assistant delivered, personally carried. That detail alone would become gossip by evening. He closed the door behind him carefully before handing her 1 cup. You haven't eaten? Neither have you. Fair. For a moment, neither mentioned Leela or the board or the failed credential replication attempt, now detonating through executive channels like a controlled explosion. Instead, they stood near the windows listening to distant office noise beyond the glass walls. The silence between them no longer felt strained, just honest. Martin loosened his tie slightly. Arthur's terrified. He should be. He thinks investors may demand external oversight if this escalates. Rebecca took a slow sip of coffee. Investors don't fear mistakes. They fear hidden mistakes. A faint smile appeared at the corner of Martin's mouth. You always did phrase disasters beautifully. Outside, clouds drifted across the river in slow silver layers. Tugboats moved below like dark chess pieces through cold water. Then Martin's expression changed, subtly. Legal found another access trail. Rebecca lowered her cup. Where? Executive administration servers. He hesitated. The masking protocol wasn't internal. That landed heavily because internal manipulation was survivable. External involvement was war. Rebecca set the coffee down carefully on her desk. Someone brought in outside assistance. That's what it looks like. The room grew quieter. Even the city beyond the windows suddenly seemed farther away. For the first time since the freeze began, Rebecca felt something colder than concern move through her thoughts. Intent, not reckless ambition, planned infiltration. Martin watched her closely now. You already suspected that. I suspected Leela wasn't sophisticated enough to build the routing sequence alone. His brow tightened. You really think she understood what she was touching? No. Rebecca walked slowly toward the trustee file cabinet near the far wall. That's what worries me. She unlocked the lower drawer with a small brass key she still carried herself instead of delegating. Inside rested archived documentation arranged with near-surgical precision, contingencies, authority chains, dormant protections, invisible architecture holding enormous amounts of money together. Martin leaned against the desk. Rebecca? She glanced up. You know the board's discussing suspensions. Of course they are. Leela included. Rebecca's expression barely changed. That surprised him. You're not satisfied, he observed quietly. Rebecca slid 1 file free from the drawer. This isn't about satisfaction. No? She turned toward him fully now. Someone attempted to penetrate a protected trust structure tied to $52 million during an active debt restructuring. Her voice remained calm, but steel lived beneath every syllable now. That's not office politics anymore. Martin said nothing, because he knew she was right. Outside the office, hurried footsteps passed the glass walls. Somewhere nearby, a printer spat out endless pages while voices rose sharply in another conference room. The entire building felt suspended above a crack no one could fully see yet. Rebecca opened the file. Inside sat authorization records dating back almost 11 years. Martin's eyes narrowed. Why are you looking at legacy trustees? Because people repeat patterns. She flipped several pages carefully, then stopped. Stillness spread across her expression. Martin noticed immediately. What? Rebecca didn't answer right away. Instead, she slowly removed a single sheet from the file and placed it on the desk between them. Martin stepped closer, read the name, and went completely silent, because the authorization witness listed beside an old restructuring amendment belonged to someone neither of them had mentioned once during the crisis, Daniel Mercer, former external compliance consultant, officially retired 8 months earlier, unofficially known for building financial shielding structures so complex even regulators struggled to untangle them quickly. Martin looked up sharply. Mercer? Rebecca's pulse remained steady, though something icy now settled behind her ribs. Yes. That's impossible. He hasn't worked with Vance in almost a year. He hasn't worked officially, Rebecca corrected softly. Thunder rumbled faintly somewhere beyond the river, though the sky remained pale. Martin stared again at the document. You think he's connected to the access attempt? I think people like Mercer never disappear completely. Rebecca closed the file slowly. They move into shadows where invoices stop existing. A dangerous silence filled the office, because both of them understood exactly what Mercer represented. Not chaos, precision, the kind of precision capable of quietly repositioning financial control structures without detection until it was too late. Martin rubbed a hand across his face. Arthur needs to know. Not yet. He looked at her carefully. Why not? Rebecca walked back toward the windows overlooking Manhattan. Below, the city continued moving with indifferent elegance. Yellow taxis, gray sidewalks, tiny human figures hurrying through cold daylight, unaware that entire financial structures above them were beginning to fracture. Because if Mercer is involved, she said quietly, then someone inside this building already knows the board will panic. And? Rebecca's reflection stared back at her from the glass. And panic makes people erase things. Martin understood instantly. Which meant somewhere, perhaps already, servers were being cleaned, messages deleted, access logs adjusted, quiet digital fingerprints wiped away beneath layers of procedural noise. The realization darkened his expression. A knock hit the office door suddenly. 3 quick taps. Urgent. Ethan entered before either answered, breathing slightly faster than usual. Rebecca, legal just received another notification from bank counsel. She turned immediately. What happened? Ethan swallowed once. The secondary review expanded. Martin frowned. Expanded how? Ethan looked directly at Rebecca. The trust structure wasn't the only system targeted. The room went still. Outside the office walls, phones continued ringing, elevators continued humming, executives continued pretending this was merely another difficult corporate afternoon. But inside Rebecca's office, something much more dangerous had just revealed itself. This had never been about one credit line. Someone had been reaching for the entire foundation beneath Vance Financial, and suddenly the Q4 dinner felt very far away. Night returned to Manhattan wearing fog. By 8:30, the city outside Vance Financial had dissolved into blurred gold lights and silver haze drifting between skyscrapers. From the executive floor, the streets below looked distant and unreal, like reflections trapped beneath dark water. Most employees had gone home hours ago, yet the building still pulsed with sleepless electricity. Entire departments remained awake behind glass walls. No one trusted tomorrow anymore. Rebecca stood alone inside the archival records room, deep behind executive legal, where the air smelled faintly of paper, cold metal, and dust untouched by sunlight. Rows of secured cabinets stretched beneath soft fluorescent lighting, while climate control vents hummed overhead with mechanical indifference. This room had always comforted her. Because documents didn't lie, people did. She slid another file carefully across the steel table and studied the chain of access reports Ethan had printed 20 minutes earlier. Columns of timestamps reflected across her glasses, routing pathways, authentication mirrors, administrative relays, patterns. The deeper she looked, the less accidental everything became. Someone had mapped the company slowly, patiently, like a thief memorizing the architecture of a museum long before touching the glass. A quiet sound behind her broke the silence. Footsteps. Rebecca looked up. Ethan stood in the doorway, breathing unevenly, one hand gripping a tablet so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. They found Leela's assistant, he said. Rebecca straightened slightly. Where? Compliance interview room? Something in his tone sharpened the atmosphere instantly. What happened? Ethan stepped inside and lowered his voice. She resigned? Rebecca's expression remained calm, but her attention narrowed completely now. Tonight? Yes. That's not the important part, is it? Ethan swallowed once. She wiped her company phone before surrendering it. The ventilation system suddenly sounded louder. Rebecca closed the file slowly. There it was, the panic she had been waiting for, because innocent people defended themselves. Guilty people erased timelines. Who authorized her device release? Rebecca asked. No one? Ethan hesitated. Security stopped her in the lobby before she left. Outside the records room, distant office noise echoed faintly through corridors still glowing after hours. Somewhere, an elevator opened and closed. Somewhere else, legal teams continued building emergency reports for investors who now demanded answers by sunrise. But here, beneath fluorescent light and cold air, the truth was finally beginning to crawl into view. Rebecca rose from the table. Did she say anything? Ethan gave a strained laugh without humor. Only that she was following instructions. Rebecca felt the words settle heavily. Not surprising, but dangerous, because instructions implied structure, and structure implied someone still believed they could control the fallout. She gathered several documents into a thin black folder. Where's Martin? In Arthur's office with bank counsel. Good. Ethan watched her carefully now. You already know who this leads to, don't you? Rebecca paused, then shook her head once. No, I know who touched the surface. Her gaze shifted toward the dark hallway beyond the records room. I still don't know who built the ladder? Fog drifted thicker outside the skyscraper windows, while somewhere below, headlights smeared across wet streets like rivers of molten gold. The city felt suspended in breathless anticipation. Rebecca stepped into the corridor. Ethan followed quickly beside her. There's something else. Tonight keeps offering surprises? The wiped phone recovered one partial message before deletion. Rebecca stopped walking. What message? Ethan opened the tablet with nervous fingers. The recovered fragment glowed against the screen. Make sure Rebecca never regains. The sentence ended there, cut off mid-deletion. Cold silence spread through the corridor. For the first time in 2 days, genuine emotion flickered visibly across Rebecca's face. Not fear, recognition, because now the shape of the attack finally looked familiar. Not greed alone, displacement. Someone hadn't merely wanted access to the trust structure. Someone wanted Rebecca removed from it permanently. The realization changed everything. Ethan saw it happen in her eyes. You know something. Rebecca resumed walking. Fast now. The executive corridor ahead stood nearly empty except for pools of amber light reflecting across polished floors. Their footsteps echoed sharply while office doors remained closed around them like silent witnesses. Rebecca, who had access to my trustee succession review from last year? Ethan blinked. Only executive legal and... He stopped mid-sentence, because he understood too. Leela couldn't have orchestrated this alone, not with this level of targeting, not with knowledge of succession pathways buried deep inside protected legal archives. Rebecca reached Arthur's office doors without slowing. Voices exploded inside before she even entered. Arthur sounded furious. Don't care what investors think anymore, I want names. Martin answered sharply. Then stop treating this like a PR issue. Rebecca opened the doors. The room fell silent instantly. Arthur looked exhausted beyond anger now. His tie hung loose, sleeves rolled unevenly, expensive composure stripped away by 20 hours of cascading disaster. Bank counsel sat near the windows reviewing documents, while Martin turned toward Rebecca immediately. Then everyone noticed the folder in her hand, and the atmosphere changed. What is it? Martin asked quietly. Rebecca placed the black folder on the conference table. Inside rested copies of archival trustee amendments dating back 11 years. On top sat one highlighted signature authorization, Daniel Mercer. Bank counsel leaned forward slowly. Where did you find this? In legacy restructuring archives? Arthur frowned deeply. Mercer consulted on old compliance shields. That's irrelevant. No, Rebecca said calmly. It's foundational? She slid another page across the table. A succession review request, time-stamped 14 months earlier, signed internally. Arthur picked it up. His face lost color, because beneath the approval chain sat a second authorization signature none of them expected to see. Not Leela, not Mercer. Someone still employed, someone trusted. Martin stared at the name in disbelief. No. Bank counsel removed his glasses slowly again, just as he had during the board meeting earlier that morning. Only this time, nobody spoke. Outside the windows, fog swallowed half the skyline, while the city lights below flickered like distant warning signals beneath dark clouds. Rebecca looked around the silent room. At Arthur, at Martin, at the scattered pieces of panic finally assembling into shape. Then she spoke softly. The trust was never the real target. Arthur looked up slowly. Then what was? Rebecca's gaze settled on the signature one final time. The succession authority. The room froze completely because everyone there suddenly understood the same horrifying possibility at once. Someone inside Vance Financial hadn't been preparing for a temporary credit freeze. They had been preparing for control after collapse.